Started. So just to review, I'll go over what we did on Monday. If you guys remember, we're trying to implement this method of authorization where you send two different tokens. One is an access token, one is a refresh token, and then you have a time when when the access token expires. So what we did on Monday was we created the register account endpoint where you have an email, a password, and then you have a user that you're trying to create using this user's DAO file. And then here you optionally get this user, and if there is a user, you would return that failed because you're trying to register a user that's already been created. Otherwise, you return true and you create that user. And so that in your app.py, you can just return the session token, the session expiration, and the update token of that user. Okay. The next route we're going to implement is how to log in. And so this is going to be pretty similar. You're going to pass in an email and a password in the body. So we'll get started with this. First thing is body equals json.loads request.data. Then we want to get our email. So that's email equals body.get email, as well as we want the password. We want to make sure that neither of these are none. So if email is none or password is none, you want to, return a failure response. Oh, looks like I don't have failure response implemented. Okay, we'll just do the previous way. JSON.dumps. And then we're going to say we have a dictionary with error. And the error is invalid email or password. And then this is also going to have an error response. So we'll say 400. Okay, so now that we know that we have the email and password, we actually want to log that user in. So we can say, so to actually like find out what the user is, we have to verify those credentials. And that's going to be in our users underscore DAO.py. If you see, we have verified credentials here, and that's because this actually has to do with the credentials of the user. So we'll get started on writing this verify credentials and then go back to app.py. So in order to verify the credentials, we need to get this user. And again, we're going to call it an optional user equals, and we're going to want to get that user by its email. If optional user is not none, we're going to want to, or in this case, if the optional user is none, in which case we haven't actually created that user yet, then we can't log him in. So we're going to want to return false as well as none. If you remember the second, we're returning two things. The first one being if it's successful or not, and the second one being like, what is the user? So now if we do have the user, we actually want to verify that that the password matches the user's email. And so to do this, we want to return, and then we have return optional user dot verify password or passing password, as well as we would just return that optional user. And so where does dot verify password come from? Well, the user would have these methods here. And if you receive verify password, we'll check the password against this digest that we have that was stored from the user using this bcrypt package that we have. So this will return true if it works, and then return the user. Otherwise, it will return false if it doesn't work. Okay, so if we go back into our app.py here, and I'll pop this out to the right, so it's like still open. Okay, there's verified credentials now right here. So I'm going to be calling that method right now. And we want to say success, comma user equals users underscore DAO dot verify credentials. And we want to pass it in that email and password. So now, if not success, we can know that this didn't work, and this means that the password was incorrect or the email was incorrect. So we can again return this failure response of like saying that there was an error. The error would be incorrect email or password. And then failure response. Okay, so that's oh, and then the last thing would be to actually return the user's information if it is successful, and to return that we want to return json.dumps, and then we have a little bit of a dictionary that we want to return here. So inside here we want to first say the session token. This would we would just get this from the user. We're also going to want to return the session expiration. Okay, wait, so this was the same as up here. I'm actually just going to copy this, but we want the session token, the session expiration, and the update token. So I'm going to copy it from the file that we had from Monday, or the method from registering an account. Okay. And that's what it would look like to log in. Do we have any questions about this logging in method? Okay. We're going to skip logging out for now, and we're going to come back to that later. The next thing we want to do is I'm going to go on to this method right here called secret message. The idea of this is that there's a message that is only able to be seen if that session token has been verified. So the two things that are needed to verify session token are that the session token actually exists and that it hasn't been past that session expiration time. So first thing we're going to want to do is actually get the token from the user. So to do that, we can say session token equals, and then we actually have, a method up here called extract token, which will give us the token given the request that from Postman. So what it would look like is, for example, if I'm going here, let me actually run my app.py. I'll take this out for now, just to show what it looks like. Okay. So if I did want to create a user, this one I think already exists. So I'll change the email. So now I have this user here. With this session token, I would have copied this, gone into secret. Then you click on from body, which is what we normally use. We go instead into header. And then in the headers, you click on key, type in authorization. And then to the right, where you have all your values, you would type in bearer, because this is the session token, which has that bearer title to start off. And then you would just paste in this session token that we have. And so this route would work. Obviously, I haven't written it, so we're getting this error here. But once we implement that, the session token should give us whatever secret we want to return. So to go back to this extract token, the way it would look is we want to actually get that value from the header. So the first thing we need to do is we have to get the auth header. We can call it auth header. And this just equals the request dot headers dot get, and then we'd get authorization. We want to make sure that this authorization key is actually present in the header. So if auth header is none, we would return a failure response. Or actually, this is just a helper method. We just return false for that it failed. And then JSON.dumps and say error. And we can say it's missing the auth header. Okay. Now, if the auth header is there, we actually want to get what the value is. So we can say bearer token equals auth header dot, and we'll use the replace method in Python to get rid of that initial part that says bearer. So we can replace bearer with an empty string. And then we also want to make sure that there's no spaces at the front or the back. So we can say dot strip. So this will get us just that token part, just like the random numbers and letters, and not include that bearer that we don't really need. It's more just to know what type of token it is. So now that we have the bearer token, we want to make sure that the bearer token is actually there. So the first thing would be if not bearer token. We can say return, and then we're going to return false and then have another error. So we'll say JSON.dumps error, and the error will be invalid auth header. Okay. Now that we know that the bearer token works, or at least like is a valid one, we can just return true, comma bearer token. So this is our helper method. I'll write in our documentation here that we always want to include. We'll say helper method for extracting the token. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this extract token method? Okay. If not, we're going to go back to our secret message. So the first thing we're going to want is to actually extract that token. So what we can say is that we have success, comma, session token equals extract token. And we're just going to pass in the request. Okay. So we want to check first if this is a failure or not. So if not success, then we want to return. In this case, we're just going to return session token. And the reason for this is that when we did fail it, we had it be that JSON.dumps with an error. So this will return like the proper error. In the case that it's not the success, this won't actually be a session token. If it is a success, we want to get that user by his session token. So I'm going to quickly go over to this .db file. And if we look, we have, this user's DAO file. So one of the methods that we have is get user by session token. And so we're going to be using that. Where's the header over here? Okay. So yeah, so this is one of the helper methods that we have. So I'm going to say user equals users underscore DAO dot get user by session token and pass in that session token. Okay. So then we want to make sure that that user actually exists. So if user is none, the user could be none, but we also want to make sure that that session token is for that user. So what we want to say is if user is none or user dot, and then we want to verify that that session token belongs to the user. So we have user dot verify underscore session underscore token. And this comes from right here, verify session token. So this verify session token will check that the tokens are actually equal and that the current time is less than that session expiration time. Okay, so then we pass in the session token. It's or, and then yeah. So in the case that it can't verify it or that the user is none, we would just return a failure response. So we can say JSON dot dumps. And then we can just say invalid session token as the actual error. Okay. So now that we have our successfully, now that we know that the user works and that the session token is valid, we can just return whatever secret message is. In this case, we just want to return JSON.dumps, and you can really put whatever you want here just to show that what you did was works. We can say message, and the message will be, wow, we implemented session tokens. Okay. Whoops, I forgot. The dictionary. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions about secret message and how we wrote that? Yeah. Yeah, so normally we would. This is more just to show off like how authorization works. So if I did 200, yeah, it would be good practice. This is more just like just to show that we like how to actually implement these tokens. I'll go over to Postman, and I'm gonna want to run this secret thing with the token that we have. I never ran my file. Wow, we implemented session token. So this clearly is a valid session token, and we know that because I just registered the user. If you see, we do have this 200 OK status code. If we do take this out, save it, and then rerun this, it'll just default to 200 OK. Okay. The next route we want to implement would be to update the session. So how do we actually update the session? Well, the idea is you pass in the update token, and then you get in like a new session token and then a new update token. And so the reason why this was created was that way you don't have to re-log in if you're trying to just like keep using the app for longer and not have to like send in the username and password again. Instead, you have the session token, the update token, and you can quickly send that and refresh your two tokens so they both are being changed like pretty constantly, and your app can maintain like its security. So to actually implement this update session, the idea of update session is the token gets passed in the same way. So if we go to, I called it refresh, but it's update, right? You have authorization, and then again, you're going to have bearer followed by a value. So we're going to use the same one as before. We'll use this when we want to actually update our token. And just to remember, these were our first ones. So we'll check back to make sure that these are both unique when we actually refresh it. Okay, so let's start actually writing our update session. The first thing we're going to want is to, again, similar to the secret message, get the success and the session token. Session. Using the helper function that we have for extracting the token. If not success, this is the first time we want to check. If it wasn't successful, we just return update token. Oh, whoops. This would be update token, not a session token. Okay. So if it wasn't successful, return that update token, which in this case will be whatever their error is. And then we can also try to renew the session. So just to show you where renew session is, we're going to on the user's DAO file. And so we're going to want to write this, and then we'll come back to app.py. Let me make this bigger. Okay. So to renew a session, the first thing we want to do is first get the user. And so we can get the user. If you see, we have a method written for us called get user by update token. If we see what it does, all it does is just filter where the update token equals that update token we passed in. So we're gonna feed it in update token. If user is none, we just want to check to make sure that there is a user with that session token. But if there isn't, we're gonna say return none. So there's no user, there's no user with that update token. And then in the case that there is a user, we're just going to want to renew that session. So to renew the session, if we go into the DB file here, you can see that we have this renew session, which all it does is assign the session token to be a new random string. It resets the expiration token to be 2 days or 1 day from the current time, and then resets the update token to be a new random set of string and letters. So we're gonna just want to call that on the user dot renew session. And then we're gonna actually want to commit those changes to actually update that user. And then once we're done, we want to return the user. Okay. So now if we go back to app.py, we can say we want to renew the session. And so what we're going to say is user equals users underscore DAO dot renew session. We want to pass in that update token. So now again, if user is none, which is the case that, the user did not, there's no user with that update token, then we can return the error saying invalid update token. JSON dot say invalid update token. And now if the user does exist, we can just return the user's new information. I'm going to go up to our login method and copy again what we want to return here. Remember, we only want to return the session token, the session expiration, and the update token, because that's all the information that they need to relog in that user, and we don't want to be sending the email and password back in the response. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about update session or renew session? Okay. If not, we can go on to the last method here, and that would be to log out. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to go on Postman and show how exactly this is going to work. So the app is running. Save it. Okay. So if we remember from when I registered this user, this is the current session token. Then I'm going to go to actually update the session. So I put in that value after bearer in our authorization header. And then if I send this, invalid update token, and that's because I sent the session token. If I instead copy the update token and send that in through the refresh endpoint, I get 2 new values, completely random strings. Okay. Also, the reason that these are all post requests is that posts is when you're giving any information. And so because we're giving this authorization info, it's a post request, even though there's no actual body to the route. All right. Okay. The last endpoint we want to get to is to log out. And so what does log out actually mean for us? Well, we just want to make sure that the session token no longer works. So there's a few options for us to do this. Because we have a user that always has to have a session token since they were created, we don't want to set that session token to none. It would just kind of ruin the logic of what we have going on. But what's another way we can invalidate that session token without removing it? Can anyone think of any way to invalidate the session token without getting rid of the session token and just changing what the user's attributes are? Go to what the user has. Of these things, what can we change to invalidate that session token? Does anyone have any ideas? Yeah, so we can change this session expiration to actually be the current time. So if anyone tries to log in after this user is logged out, it'll be past that session expiration and it won't give them access, which will basically invalidate this session token. Does that make sense to everyone? So we can go ahead and do that in our log out endpoint here. So first thing is we're going to use that session token to verify the user. So we're going to say success, comma, session token equals extract token and pass in the request. Then again, we always want to check if success was false. We could return json.dumps and put in the dictionary with the error. And then say invalid. Oh, wait, in the case that the success was wrong, we actually just return the session token because that will already contain what the error was from extract token. And then we actually want to get the user by the session token. So we can say user equals users is DAO dot get user by session token and pass in that session token. Then we want to say if not user to make sure that the user exists. Then we also want to check that the that session token actually is for that user specifically. So we can say user dot verify dot verify session token and then pass in that session token. So if it's an invalid session token, we can return that in as the error. So JSON dumps, we'll say error, and then we'll just say invalid session token. We'll give it a 400. Then at this point, we just want to we know that the user is now validated. We have the user, and we just want to make sure that these session tokens will no longer work in the future. So we can say is user dot session expiration and change that expiration time to be right now. So what we would do is datetime dot now. If you're not finding datetime here, you have to make sure you have import datetime at the top of your file. Okay. So what we just did was change that session expiration to expire at the current moment. So anytime someone tries to use the access token in the future, it will not work. And then we actually want to just commit this. So db.session.commit. And then we want to return a JSON response. And we can just say, I have a message in here. And the message will say, user has successfully logged out. Okay. So now let's go through everything all in Postman. I'm gonna just go over the methods that we have real quick, or all the routes. So we start off with being able to register an account. Then the user can log in as well as log out. They can update that session. So remember our session tokens last 1 day. And then they also have a secret message to make sure that the tokens work and the authorization is set up correctly. One thing we can do just to show the like how the expiration works is we can change, oops. We can change the time delta in this session expiration to instead be minutes equals 1. So now let me go to Postman. I'm going to register a new user. So maw@cornell.edu with the password being secure. I'm going to get this information here. I have my session token. So if I wanted to see this secret, I could paste that into the authorization after bear. And I get this message here. Wow, we implemented session token. If I wait a minute, maybe a minute was too long. But okay. Well, we'll give it a minute to for the session token expire. What we would then have to do is go get the refresh token and hit the refresh endpoint to get a new session token. And then after we have that session token, we can log out. Okay. Let me just set up the log out. So see now in secret, when I refreshed it, it's been a minute. And now this error of invalid session token, because it has just expired. What we can do is we can go into refresh and we need to now get the refresh token. So we'll go back to when we register the user and we have this refresh token here. We'll go into refresh, give it that new token. Oops. Go into refresh, give it a new token here. And now the user has been refreshed. If we go back to secret, we'll see that, oh wait, I need to give it the new session token. So that session token works. If you want to actually log the user out, we would pass in that session token. And now the user has been successfully logged out. We try to go back to secret, even though it's been less than a minute. We'll say invalid session token because it's already expired. Okay. Now that we've been through all the routes, does anyone have any questions about any of the code we have, any of the Postman tests we have, or how any of the logic works?